We are hearing from Jody Wilson-Raybould on this about all the caucus reaction. So let's go to Ottawa. CTV's Glen McGregor standing by with that. Glen, what are we hearing her say?
Yeah, all day long we've been hearing Morella from Liberal MPs who are really unhappy with the fact that she made this recording. You know, for a while, there's been a group of people in that caucus who have wanted her out because of the steady drip of information about the SNC-Lavalin affair. When she decided to release that audio recording that she made surreptitiously of her conversation back in December with the clerk of the Privy Council, Michael Wernick, that was a point for a lot of other people to say, this is the reason now why she needs to leave caucus. We've been hearing from many MPs today saying exactly that. They're upset. They don't trust her. They're very concerned. Now, just a few moments ago, we caught up with Jody Wilson-Raybould as she was leaving West Block on Parliament Hill. You're going to hear Rachel Aiello, our online producer, talking to her, asking her about these questions and about whether or not she wants to stay in the Liberal caucus. Let's listen to what she had to say.
First of all, I do not believe that I should be removed from caucus for doing my job and doing what I believe is right. With respect to the audio recording, I've heard some caucus members make comments. The conversation I had with the clerk, he's not a member of the Liberal caucus. He's not my client by his own admission. I know that that was an extraordinary situation, and of course I've reflected on it many times and still do. I spoke with members of my community over the weekend. I asked a trusted advisor about it, and their response was, and I believe this, that it was a reasonable, rational thing to do in an unreasonable and an irrational situation. So.
Why was it an unreasonable and irrational situation?
I felt, and this doesn't go beyond anything that I haven't already said in evidence, I felt I needed to protect myself. I felt that, again, it was an extraordinary situation where I knew that my position was being threatened.
How does it make you feel to hear your colleagues?
All right, Glen, so there we have a lot of information from Jody Wilson-Raybould. She doesn't very often talk and answer questions very much. So what did you make of that?
Extraordinary. First of all, the fact that she wants to stay in Liberal caucus. There's been some speculation that she might quit before she's thrown out. On Wednesday, when the Liberal caucus is scheduled to meet on Wednesday morning here in Ottawa. The other thing I'm taking away from that is her rationale, her rationalization maybe, of why she decided to make that recording. She was trying to protect herself, and she calls it, as you heard her say, a reasonable thing to do in an unreasonable and irrational situation. Obviously, she is a little bit conflicted about this herself, but she feels that her caucus colleagues will possibly give her the benefit of the doubt on this. The other thing that was really interesting about that was her saying that Michael Wernick, the clerk of the Privy Council, the conversation that she recorded with him, that he is not a member of Liberal caucus. She's correct. He's a public servant. And she also said that in his own words, Mr. Wernick's words, that there was no solicitor-client relationship. And she's correct about that, because when Mr. Wernick appeared before the Justice Committee, one of the issues that was hovering over that first appearance was the possibility that anything that Jody Wilson-Raybould said would be covered by solicitor-client privilege. And of course, if were she to breach that, there would be consequences for her as a lawyer. But he also said at that committee hearing that he did not believe that solicitor-client privilege applied in that case. So any kind of recourse he has, saying that, oh, well, she was acting as my lawyer then and she inappropriately recorded me, is kind of out the window. And that's important because a lot of the law societies across the country, including in British Columbia and also in Ontario, that Jody Wilson-Raybould would be a member of, prohibit lawyers from recording their own clients. A little bit about that situation, like in the United States, we've heard about Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former lawyer, recording Donald Trump talking about payoffs to exotic dancers and such. So anyway, interesting that she would bring that up, use Wernick's own words to kind of clear her of any kind of professional wrongdoing in making that recording.
Sure, Glenn.
Will
but
this wash with caucus?
Yeah.
We don't know.
Let me interrupt for a moment because you make a good point. So legally, she's not done something wrong. But what I've heard from the other MPs, and I'm sure you have as well, is that she may not have crossed the line in a legal way, but it bothers them that she taped somebody who's quote unquote part of that team where they expect to speak freely and openly and not be recorded.
Yes, and especially at the cabinet level. I mean, cabinet discussions are at the highest level of confidentiality, so much so that when ministers come into a cabinet meeting, there's little tiny lockers that they put their cell phones in to make sure that nothing gets out from those meetings. Now, caucus is a much leakier ship. Often we hear things that were discussed in caucus leaked out anonymously after the fact. But still, it's a real concern, I think, for rank-and-file Liberals MPs to think that she would go that far to protect herself. And a lot of them, frankly, feel they can't trust her now. They can't sit in caucus and have an open conversation in front of her, especially when you think about on Wednesday, the conversation is going to be all about her future in caucus, whether or not they're good with her staying in, and also preferably whether or not Jane Philpott should also stay in. The other thing we're watching for, Morella, this week is what kind of role the Prime Minister is going to play in this process. Is he going to stay in that caucus meeting? Is he going to recuse himself, step out, and let his caucus decide? There's pros and cons for each approach. If caucus decides to kick her out and the Prime Minister stands back and lets it happen, does he look weak by doing that? Should he not have been more decisive, as he was when he threw out two other Liberal MPs who were accused of sexual misconduct back when he was in opposition? So all this playing out now, but really that recording we just heard from Jody Wilson-Raybould, quite unusual, quite extraordinary that she would speak that frankly and at that length to reporters in the middle of the SNC-Lavalin affair, Morella.
So a couple things I want to clarify with you, and you know this from being an Ottawa insider, is that when you're part of that bigger team, the Liberal team, the Conservative team, the NDP team, they really see it as a team. And I think part of what the problem here is that they feel one member of the team has gone astray on their own and is sort of working for her own protection instead of being part of that team and fostering sort of that team's growth ahead. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, but the other thing I wanted to check with you is that then it is up to caucus to decide whether or not she stays or goes. It's not up to the Prime Minister himself.
Not exactly, no. It is up to the Prime Minister. He can decide who is in his caucus and who is not. He can act unilaterally on that if he chooses, as he did in the case of Scott Andrews and Massimo Pichetti, the MPs accused of sexual misconduct. He just went and did it and basically tore up their memberships and threw them out of the caucus. He could do that in this case. One of the complications here, though, is Jody Wilson-Raybould recently became the renominated candidate in her riding of Vancouver-Granville. She's standing for the Liberals in the October election. So if he's going to kick her out of caucus, presumably he's going to rescind her nomination, and that riding association will have to find a new candidate. To your earlier point, though, about motivation and the team, lots of speculation on why Jody Wilson-Raybould has been speaking out so forcefully on this point. And it runs the gamut from people think she's acting ethically and doing this on a point of principle to other people who think she has ulterior motives and she's doing it to self-promote. But regardless, a lot of MPs are worried about how it's affecting the party brand and then also their own possibility for re-election, because the longer this affair drags on, the worse the news becomes for the Liberals. And Liberal MPs who are in marginal ridings they did not win easily, and there are a lot of those, especially sort of in suburban Toronto, the 905 district, also in the lower mainland of British Columbia, ridings that have been conservative in the past or New Democrat in some cases. They are very worried. And so a lot of those MPs see this as a question of job security for them. Keep in mind, a lot of these MPs who are part of this government, this is their first term, and they are not guaranteed also their pensions because they have to serve 6 years in the House of Commons before they can collect their pensions. So if they lose their seats because of what Jody Wilson-Raybould has done to the party brand, in their view, then they are out of jobs in October and also out of a nice government pension.
Got it. CTV's Glen McGregor with the latest out of Ottawa. Glen, thanks.
Thank you.